All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going live, and I am going to go do my thing on Facebook and share. And if, as you tune in, you want to do the same, that would be great. Okay, and I'm going to pull up the feed so that hopefully I can see who's here. Turn my volume way down. There we go. All right. So, welcome back, everybody. Hope you are doing wellish during our continued shutdown time. And it is great that as of yesterday here in Ohio, we are starting to talk about the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, as things are progressively starting to open back up. And but we're going to keep on doing things like this in the meantime. So, hey, I see Karen is here. Hi, Karen. Marissa, happy Tuesday to you as well. Jay, great to see you. And I know there are more people joining us. So while we wait for others, I've been doing a couple songs. I'm going to do that again today. And I've been trying to decide what to call these songs because they're not oldies. Like, they're somewhat oldies to me because they're from generally the late 90s to early 2000s. But I realize oldies usually communicates something entirely different than that. Hey, Pauline, good to see you here. But I thought about calling them flashbacks, but I came up with this label for now. So I'm calling them rear view mirror songs because there are songs that are far enough behind me that we don't do them much anymore, but they're not so far behind that, you won't hear anything probably from the 50s or 60s, campfire quarantine. Yeah. That works fine. So anyway, a couple more songs today while we wait for some others to arrive. So here we go. We fall down, we lay our crowns at the feet of Jesus. Accepted, you were condemned, and I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me, because you died and rose again. I'm forgiven, because you were forsaken, Lord, I'm accepted. You were condemned. honor you. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Yeah. Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you in all I do. I honor you in all I do. I honor you. And we cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. So there we go. Good enough. I believe that's what the kids today call a mashup. Am I getting that right? Squeezing two songs together. We just call that a medley. Not anymore. Got to invent new words for all the things. All right, so let's get down to some devotional business. And I'm realizing now that I forgot to bring something with me. So I'm going to ask my lovely co-singer, who is not on screen right now, if she can go downstairs and grab the book. It's sitting on the desk down there that I'm using for this. So if you have not been with us, I've been using a book for these devotions. What Would Jesus Ask? Again, great book. Pick it up. You can probably get it used for cheap. It's old-ish, not a new book. And it basically has us asking these questions about what Jesus asked the people when he taught them. And so today we are going to get into another one of those. The title for today is Soul versus Stuff. And we're going to be looking at a question that Jesus asks in Matthew chapter 16. Thank you. The book looks like this. What did Jesus ask? And today we'll be looking at a devotional in here from Jonathan L. Walton. And he's going to cover this passage in Matthew 16, verse 26. And the question Jesus asks that we will get to here is, what good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? So let's dig in with the whole context of the question Jesus asked, because we're going to talk about where the question is situated today as part of our study, if you will. So Matthew 16, I'm going to read verses 21 through 27. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done." So today we're going to talk about our soul versus our stuff. So, and I see we have some more people joining in. Yes, Karen, that was my wife. I'm glad you picked up on that, even though she was off frame. Jerry and Betty, hey, good to have you guys here. So let's dig into this passage a little bit. Hey, Howard's here as well. Great to see you, Howard. So you guys are all kind of stuck. We're all stuck, right? Indoors, stay at home, all that stuff. And I don't know about you, but being stuck at home in our household eventually led to this desire to do a little bit of spring cleaning, a little bit of cleansing, if you will. And I don't know about you guys, but it's leading me to ask questions about how and why did we accumulate this much stuff? And one area that we in our household are guilty at stockpiling is books. We have books upon books upon books. We love books. Ooh, yeah. We all of us are book lovers. But the pile had gotten too big, the shelves too full, and so we were looking through some of the books that it's time to say goodbye to. And I must say, I was proud that the books under the table that I'm going to give away were more than the books on the table. But some of those books, I mean, going way, way back. College days, books that I used at Malone when I was studying to be a social studies teacher. But my wife, she really took the cake because in one of her books, she found a hall pass from high school. So that's how far back that went, right? So we accumulate books and many, many other things. And really, there is something cathartic about this kind of a cleansing. Some of it's just practical, right? When we simplify the space around us, we tend to decrease the amount of stress that we feel inside of us, which is a good thing. An increase in order can lead to a decrease in anxiety, and that's especially true for the more orderly among us who feel much, much better when everything is in its place and there's enough place for all the things that you have. But according to Jesus, there is even a deeper spiritual truth at work here. Because he seems to indicate that there is an inverse relationship, and I might even say an antagonistic relationship between our stuff and our souls, according to Jesus. He says you can gain one, but you will lose the other. He says you can give an exchange of one for the other. And scientific studies agree with this wisdom, that there isn't a positive correlation between having more stuff and more happiness. From the Devotional from Jonathan Walton on page 43, he says this: once we reach a certain level of economic stability, and that's important because it's okay to want enough stuff to feel that you have a stable life, a livelihood. But once we reach a certain level of economic stability, there is no correlation between money and happiness. In fact, an international team of researchers found that those who live in wealthier nations such as France, New Zealand, and the United States are more likely to suffer from depression and stress than those who live in less affluent countries. So we believe maybe implicitly that our happiness and our stuff are on parallel paths, but it's actually true that they are inversely related, and that's some of what Jesus is getting at here. But here's the thing, it's not just wealth, it's not just stuff, it's not just material possessions that we chase after, seeking a sense of fulfillment that we can't actually find there. It's interesting to note, I think, that Jesus is not explicitly talking about wealth or stuff or material possessions in the context that we read. That topic is actually not seen explicitly at all, which kind of, I think, begs the question as a side note, why do we immediately go there with this passage? Why do we read about gaining and we automatically apply it to some sort of wealth or some sort of gaining of material possessions? I would argue that shows us how deeply formed we are by living in a culture that is infatuated with material goods and held captive by this overwhelming sense of consumerism. So, side note over. Sometimes, though, it's social status and recognition and influence that we're willing to exchange our souls for. Sometimes it's not wealth, material possession stuff. Sometimes it's actually to be known, to be respected, to be well-liked, to be sort of put on a societal pedestal. This actually makes more sense in connection with what we just read there in the broader scope of this passage in Matthew 16, because Peter, and by extension the disciples as well, we're told in verse 19, right before what we just read, that they are going to be given by Jesus the keys to the kingdom and the power and the authority that comes along with those keys. So if anything, the direct connection isn't to material and stuff, but it's to this desire to have authority and influence, the desire to be something and to be somebody. In the devotional, John Walton refers to this, and he references a 17th century French play. I am not a 17th century French literature scholar, so I will take his word for it. But he talks about this play, and the main character has this obsession with social status, right? And here's just a quote from what he connects that to for us. Monsieur, is that right for French? Am I close? Monsieur Jourdain. Is it J, a J?
It depends.
Yeah, it's fine.
I can't see it.
So. Monsieur Jourdain. That's how I'm going to say it because it sounds French. Monsieur Jourdain wants to be somebody. He wants others to deem him important. Yet the more he seeks the assumed behavioral and material markings of being a noble, the more he actually offends those who really love him and allows himself to look ludicrous to the people he's trying to impress. It's not always about stuff and possessions and material wealth. Sometimes it's about those other things that we can gain with a sense of social status or social standing. But Jesus does talk about this relationship between losing and gaining, right? He warns us that we might lose our soul in exchange for whatever connection we want to make, social status, material stuff, and they're all valid and accurate and good to consider. But Jesus makes a connection between losing and gaining when he says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for me will find it. Now, side note on this, don't forget that this sentence is given in the context of Jesus talking to his disciples about his actual death, his actual upcoming physical death. And some of the earliest Christians that were reading these first copies of the Gospel of Matthew that are circulating in these fledgling little churches are reading this line in the midst of a culture where their actual lives are in danger when persecution is stirred up from the outside. So for Jesus and his earliest followers, losing your life, this was like a reality. This is not something that is a metaphor. This is a very real thing. But for us today, what does it mean to actually lose our lives? How can we find more life? How can we find more of Christ? And I would argue that there's a clue, and Walton refers to this as well, that there's a clue here in what we read, the closing verse of what we read, that teaches us about the proper way to lose life, to lose ourselves in order to gain, right? And it's the very last verse that we read. The Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory and with his angels, and will reward each person according to what they have done, right? So it's gaining based on that scene. Now, if you're familiar with the Gospel of Matthew, you will know that this wording points us to another spot in Matthew's Gospel. There's this apocryphal announcement that Jesus makes later in Matthew chapter 25. And he's talking about the sheep and the goats. And listen to these words and how closely they match in Matthew 25 verses 31 and 32. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people from one another like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Right? Do you notice how closely those phrases are tied together? The Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with the angels, Matthew 16. The Son of Man comes in glory with all the angels with him, Matthew 25. So I believe that we are meant to connect these two ideas together. So Jesus is talking about losing and gaining, and then we get to this scene where the sheep and the goats are set up for this reward to be received. What is being received? So to carry on, Matthew 25, verses 34 to 40. Then the king will say to those on his right, to the sheep, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. The righteous will answer him. The sheep will say, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So Jesus speaks about the sheep, and he talks about how they lost their lives. And by that, losing their lives, how they poured their lives out, how they were exchanging their lives for something else. And that's what he talks about in this passage. They are willingly pouring out their lives for the good of others, not in order to gain material wealth or possessions or stuff, not in order to gain status or recognition, just in order to love and serve other people. And 2 decades worth of studies in our modern world agree about the benefits of caring for others, the benefits that go beyond just the grace and mercy and love that is received by those recipients. Walton refers to it here towards the end of this devotional thought. He said, several studies have confirmed the link between serving others and overall well-being. Researchers at the University of Exeter Medical School reviewed data from the previous 2 decades, so this is a lot of scientific study, 2 decades worth, to discover there is a direct link between volunteerism and lessening symptoms of depression and even the risks of dying. I love it when scientific study backs up what Jesus has to teach us. That you can give your life in exchange for a whole bunch of different things and sometimes lose your soul in the process. But here he's talking about giving your life in service to those around you, especially the least of these, the most needy, and what you will receive in exchange is a great reward. A great reward. So when we serve others instead of serving ourselves, first of all, we find the humanity in other people. We connect to these others, especially to the least of these. We connect to them in deep and powerful ways. It's one thing to read about poverty or to hear about people who are deeply in need, sick, in need of clothing, but connecting with those people, seeing them face to face, which we're all longing for that at this point, but seeing them and getting to know them, having a relationship with them, there's a connection between our humanity, our souls, and their souls. So that's step 1. Step 2, we find a deepening joy in our own minds and souls, right? When we love and serve others, we get this feeling of knowing that we're making this really important connection to who we're truly called to be. I had this experience in just a teeny tiny way yesterday because my wife made some delicious dinner for some friends, and I got to be the delivery guy, and so I got to take this food and to see a face that I hadn't seen in quite some time, and just driving home and knowing that we did a very small thing to help love and care for someone else. There's such value in that, soul value in that you can never find in stuff or status or any of those sorts of things. But not only, to finish it off, not only do we find the humanity of others with this giving and receiving, not only do we find deeper joy for ourselves, but we actually find Christ. Even if we don't realize it, we are finding Christ. Jesus says to these sheep, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. You did for me. Incredible. So by serving others, we fulfill what Jesus spoke about in chapter 16. We lose ourselves. We willingly pour ourselves out for others and for Him. He says, when you lose your life for me, when we serve others, according to Matthew 25, we are pouring out our lives for the least of these and Him. When you do it for the least of these, you are doing it for me. Our stuff is not capable of giving us true and lasting meaning and joy. Our status is not capable of giving us true and lasting meaning and joy. But extending grace and love and help and care and concern to other people strikes at something very, very deep within us, who I think we are created by God to be at our best as human beings, and we connect with God's intention for humanity. So, I know we're all yearning for that connection, to love and to serve. And listen, we could all do it from a socially distanced way at this point in time. We can make phone calls, we can send notes and cards. I know there are a lot of great nonprofits and people out there doing a lot of good loving and serving of our neighbors. So I want to encourage you today to think about your soul and your stuff, whether that stuff is material goods, possessions, and wealth, or whether that stuff is status and influence, and how is it affecting your soul? And then think about Jesus' invitation to pour out ourselves for others, which by doing so, we are living for Him, loving and serving Him, and the exchanges that we just get a tremendous amount of meaning and purpose and hope and joy in our own lives, our hearts, and our souls. So it has been great to be with you as always, and I know that there are some of you that will watch this at a later time. You couldn't make it to be with us live, so I'm glad you're able to tune in later on. At any time, you can leave comments for discussion here on this thread, and I'm just glad to connect with you and that you are able to connect with each other. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.